when a CEO shows up at a single father's door late one night with mascara running down her face, something is about to change. I had no idea just how much my life was about to flip upside down. But to understand what happened next, the story has to start in the dark, in the quiet, in a moment I would never forget. A while earlier, I had been riding the elevator alone in our downtown Chicago office building. I worked on the fourth floor in accounts payable, the department nobody visited unless something was wrong with their reimbursement. I had been on the phone with Caleb's kindergarten teacher, trying to explain why I would be a little late for pickup again when the elevator stopped on the 32nd floor. The doors opened and Brooke Wells stepped in. I recognized her immediately. Everyone in the building knew the CEO, the woman who had taken a struggling tech company and turned it into a billion-dollar enterprise in just a few years. She was tall, sharp-featured, with the kind of posture that suggested she had never once questioned whether she belonged in any room she entered. I lowered my voice but kept talking. I understand, Mrs. Jenkins. I know this has been happening a lot lately, but I promise I'll be there. I'm always there. I ended the call as the elevator descended. Brooke stood a few feet away, staring at the digital numbers above the door. She didn't acknowledge me. I didn't expect her to. But just before the doors opened on the lobby, she turned her head slightly, not enough to look at me directly, but enough to let me know she had been listening. I stepped out first, nodded politely without making eye contact, and walked toward the parking garage. I didn't think about it again, but Brooke did. Sometime later, I found myself in a conference room I had no business being in. The quarterly merger meeting had pulled in directors and executives from every department. I was only there because my supervisor had called in sick and someone needed to present the accounts payable reconciliation report. I sat at the far end of the table, invisible among the suits, waiting for my few minutes of relevance. The meeting turned hostile within the first hour. The merger was not going well. Numbers didn't add up. Projections had been missed. And when the senior vice president of operations needed someone to blame, he pointed his finger at the accounting department. The discrepancy is right here, the man said, jabbing at the screen. Your people entered the wrong figures. This is why we're short on the projection. I felt every eye in the room slide toward me. The only representative from accounting, the lowest ranking person at the table, the black man in a room full of white executives. I could have stayed quiet. I could have nodded, apologized on behalf of my department, and let the meeting move on. That was what I had always done. That was the safe play. Instead, I opened my laptop. With respect, sir, I said, my voice calm and even. The figures we submitted were accurate. The discrepancy comes from the revenue adjustment that operations requested earlier this year. I have the email chain here along with the original numbers and the revised numbers your team approved. I turned my screen toward the table. The data was clear. The mistake belonged to operations, not accounting. The room went silent. The SVP's face turned red. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Brooke spoke from the head of the table. Thank you, Mr. She glanced at the attendance sheet. Thompson, please send those documents to my office after the meeting. I nodded. Yes, ma'am. The meeting continued. I didn't say another word, but when I stood to leave, I caught Brooke watching me from across the room. Her expression revealed nothing. Soon after the meeting, she asked her assistant a single question. The accountant who spoke up today. What's his name? Where does he live? Her assistant thought the request was strange, but didn't ask why. Now, after the elevator and the meeting, Brooke stood in my doorway late one night, and everything I had built my life around, the rules, the caution, the invisible walls, threatened to collapse. I know this is crazy, she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. I know you could call the police. I know you could lose your job just for letting me stand here, but I didn't have anywhere else to go. I gripped the doorframe. My mind raced through every possible outcome. A black man alone with a white woman, his CEO, late at night. If anyone saw them, if anyone talked, if she decided later that this was a mistake and needed someone to blame. I had spent my whole life learning how to survive in a world that didn't give second chances to men who looked like me. Don't stand out, don't make waves, don't give them a reason. But the woman in front of me wasn't a CEO right now. She was a human being falling apart. And somewhere behind me in the small bedroom at the end of the hall, my 5-year-old son was sleeping. The same boy I had been teaching to never turn away from people who needed help. What kind of lesson would I be teaching if I shut the door now? I said quietly that I have a child sleeping and to keep her voice down. I stepped aside. Brooke walked into the apartment like someone entering a place she had only seen in photographs. Her eyes moved across the room, the second-hand couch with the torn armrest, the stack of children's books on the coffee table, the crayon drawings taped crookedly to the refrigerator, the half-finished bowl of cereal I hadn't had time to wash. She sat down on the couch and stared at the wall where Caleb's artwork hung. A house, a sun, two stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small. And then she started to cry. Not the polished, controlled tears of someone who cried for effect. These were ugly, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. I stood frozen by the kitchen counter, unsure whether to sit, to speak, or to pretend I wasn't watching my CEO fall apart on my furniture. My husband, she finally managed. He was cheating on me for a long time. I found out some time ago, but I didn't do anything. I thought maybe I was wrong, maybe I was imagining it, maybe if I just worked harder, was home more, was better. She stopped, drew a shaky breath. We signed the divorce papers tonight, and when I got back to my apartment, I realized something. No one called, not one person. I have 100 contacts in my phone, investors, board members, executives, assistants, and not one of them thought to ask if I was okay. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. Do you know why I came here? Brooke looked up at me. Her mascara had smeared into dark circles under her eyes. That day in the elevator, you were on the phone with your son's teacher, and you said, "I'm always there." Just like that, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. She shook her head slowly. No one has ever said that to me. Not my parents, not my husband, not anyone. I've spent my whole life making sure I didn't need anyone to say it. And tonight, sitting alone in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about it, about how you said it like you meant it. And I thought maybe, just maybe, there was one person in that building who wouldn't look at me and see a title, who wouldn't be afraid of me or try to use me. I exhaled slowly. I moved to the armchair across from her, keeping the coffee table between us. "I'm not your therapist," I said. "I'm not your friend. And when we're both back in that building, I'm still going to be a low-level accountant, and you're still going to be the CEO. You understand that, right?" Brooke nodded. "I understand." "Good." I leaned back. "So what do you actually need right now? And I mean right now, not career advice, not someone to fix your life. Just tonight." Brooke looked around the small apartment again at the toys on the floor, the colorful artwork on the wall, the faint smell of laundry detergent and maple syrup from the morning's breakfast. "I just need to sit somewhere that feels like someone lives here," she said quietly. "Just for a little while, that's all." I studied her face for a long moment. I saw exhaustion. I saw loneliness so deep it had become its own kind of weight. And underneath all of it, I saw something. I recognized the look of someone who had built their entire life around a version of themselves that was starting to crack. I stood and walked to the kitchen. "I'm going to make some tea," I said. "You can stay until the water boils, then you need to leave." Brooke nodded, but we both knew the water would take longer than that to boil. We both knew something had already begun. The following morning, I left for work before Caleb woke up. I dropped my son at Mrs. Jenkins's early pickup program and drove to the office in silence, my hands tight on the steering wheel. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, all the flights. At my desk, I buried myself in spreadsheets and reconciliation reports. When my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number saying thank you for last night, I mean it, I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it without responding. In the days that followed, I avoided the 32nd floor entirely. I ate lunch at my desk instead of the cafeteria. I left work right at the end of the day before the executives finished their end of day meetings. I made myself invisible, which was something I had spent my entire career perfecting. But one evening, Caleb broke through the walls I had built. We were sitting at the kitchen table working through his reading assignment when the boy looked up from his picture book and asked, "Daddy, is the crying lady okay?" My pen stopped moving. "What crying lady?" Caleb tilted his head the way he always did when he thought I was being silly. "The pretty lady who came to our house. I woke up and saw her sitting on the couch. She was crying really hard." I felt my chest tighten. I had assumed Caleb slept through the whole thing. I had been careful to keep my voice low and the living room door mostly closed, but 5-year-olds heard everything. "She's fine, Ma," I said carefully. "She was just having a hard night." "Was she sad because she doesn't have a daddy like me?" The question hit me somewhere deep. "Something like that," I admitted. Caleb considered this for a moment, then he asked, "Were you scared of her?" I frowned. "Scared? No. Why would I be scared?" "I don't know." Caleb shrugged and went back to his book. "She looked like me when I missed Mommy. That's all." I didn't respond. I sat there staring at my son, wondering when a 5-year-old had become wiser than I was. Sometime after the late-night visit, an email appeared in my inbox. It came from Brooke's executive assistant, a formal, carefully worded request. "Ms. Wells would like to meet with you at the cafe on Michigan Avenue this evening. This is not a work-related matter. Please confirm your availability." I read it several times. My finger hovered over the delete button, but Caleb's voice echoed in my head. "She looked like me when I miss Mommy." I typed back a single word, "confirmed." The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. Brooke was already there, sitting in a corner booth, and for a moment I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the sharp blazer and the perfectly styled hair. She wore a simple gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. No heavy makeup, no designer watch. She looked smaller somehow, like someone had let the air out of the image she usually projected. She stood when she saw me, then seemed unsure whether to shake my hand or simply wait. I solved the problem by sliding into the booth across from her, without any greeting. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Brooke said. "I wasn't sure either." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for the other night and for not reporting me to HR as a lunatic who showed up at your door." The thought crossed my mind. I signaled the waitress for coffee. "So what is this? Why am I here?" Brooke wrapped her hands around her mug, staring at the steam rising from the surface. "Can I ask you something personal? Depends on what it is. Have you ever been envious of someone? Truly envious? Not jealous of what they have, but envious of who they are?" I considered the question. "Envy is a luxury," I said finally. "I don't have time for it. I'm too busy trying to get through the day." Brooke nodded slowly. "I'm envious of you." The words hung in the air between us. I waited for the punchline, the clarification, the moment when she would explain that she was joking. It didn't come. "You're envious of me," I repeated flatly. "The CEO of a billion-dollar company is envious of an accountant who lives in a 2-bedroom apartment with a torn couch." "Yes," Brooke met my eyes. "Because when I walked into your apartment, I could feel that someone lived there. I could see it in the drawings on the wall, in the toys on the floor, in the way your son's books were stacked on the coffee table. My penthouse has everything money can buy, and when I walk through the door, it feels like entering a museum. Beautiful and empty. You have a child who calls you daddy. You have someone who needs you to come home." I set my coffee cup down harder than I intended. "You think I chose this?" My voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it now. "You think I woke up one day and decided I wanted to be a single father, working a dead-end job in a company that will never promote me?" I didn't choose any of this, I was pushed into it. Brooke didn't flinch. She waited. My wife left when Caleb was barely walking, I continued. She said I wasn't ambitious enough. She said I was too careful, too safe, too afraid to take risks. And you know what? She was right. But she didn't understand why. I'm a black man in a world that doesn't give people like me second chances. One mistake, and everything I've built falls apart. One wrong word in a meeting, and I'm the angry black man nobody wants to work with. One complaint from the wrong person, and I'm out the door with nothing. I live small because I have to, because the world has never once given me room to fail. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. You made a mistake with your marriage. You'll recover. You'll buy a new apartment, start a new company, find a new husband who doesn't cheat. You have a safety net made of money and connections, and a world that assumes you deserve second chances. When I make a mistake, my son goes hungry. When I take a risk, my son pays the price. So don't sit there and tell me you're envious of my life. You have no idea what this life costs. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Brooke didn't look away. She didn't apologize or make excuses. She just sat there absorbing every word, like someone being told a truth they had always suspected but never wanted to hear. You're right, she said quietly. I don't understand, but I want to. Something shifted in my chest. For the first time since she had walked into my apartment, I didn't feel like she was looking down at me. She was simply looking at me. Why? I asked. Why do you care what I think? Brooke took a long breath. Because you're the first person in years who has talked to me like I'm a human being and not a position. Everyone else either wants something from me or is afraid of me. You're neither, and I don't know what to do with that. I leaned back in my seat, studying her face. The woman sitting across from me was not the CEO who ran board meetings and negotiated billion-dollar deals. She was just a person trying to figure out who she was underneath the title. I recognized that feeling. I had been running from the same question for years. The rumors started sometime later. Someone in the office had seen us at the cafe. I didn't know who. Maybe the receptionist or the marketing manager who always seemed to be everywhere at once. It didn't matter. The story spread like fire through dry grass. Did you hear about the accountant from the fourth floor? The black guy? They say he's sleeping with the CEO to get a promotion. Why else would she meet with him outside the office? I heard the whispers in the break room, saw the sidelong glances when I walked past certain cubicles. I kept my head down and did my job the way I always had. But the weight of it pressed down on me like a physical thing. The merger made everything worse. Brooke's position was under threat. The new board members wanted their own people in leadership, and rumors of a CEO involved in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate gave them exactly the ammunition they needed. Employees started picking sides, those loyal to Brooke, those courting favor with the incoming regime, and I found myself caught in the middle of a war I had never asked to join. I started coming home later. I spoke less at dinner. I snapped at Caleb for leaving his toys on the floor, then felt guilty about it for hours afterward. One night, as I tucked him into bed, Caleb looked up with those wide, knowing eyes that always seem to see more than they should. Daddy, are you sad because of the teddy bear lady? I froze. The teddy bear lady? The crying lady? She gave me a teddy bear. Remember? He did remember. Brooke had visited again the previous weekend. She brought a small stuffed bear for Caleb, brown and soft with a ribbon around its neck, and spent time sitting on the floor with him looking at his drawings, asking questions about each one. I had watched from the kitchen doorway, unsure what to feel, as this powerful woman laughed at a 5-year-old's crayon drawing of a dinosaur wearing a hat. I'm fine, I said, pulling the blanket up to Caleb's chin. Don't worry about me. But Caleb didn't look convinced. The HR summons came one afternoon. I received the email and was sitting in the Human Resources Director's office shortly after. The room was small and beige with motivational posters on the walls that seemed to mock the conversation about to take place. The director, a thin woman named Mrs. Reynolds with reading glasses perched on her nose, didn't waste time with pleasantries. Mr. Thompson, I'll be direct. There have been allegations regarding your relationship with Miss Wells. The board is concerned that there may be a personal involvement that could constitute a conflict of interest or a violation of company policy. I felt my pulse quicken, but I kept my face neutral. What kind of allegations? That you and Ms. Wells are engaged in a romantic relationship, that you have been meeting outside of work hours, that there may be favoritism involved in your employment status. The words hit me like cold water. I thought of Caleb. I thought of the apartment, the bills, the careful balance of a life held together by discipline and caution. Is there a question in there? I asked. Mrs. Reynolds folded her hands on the desk. Do you have a romantic relationship with Ms. Wells? Two paths opened in front of me. I could tell the truth, that Brooke had come to me in a moment of crisis, that we had talked, that something complicated and undefined had begun to grow between us. I could stand up for myself and for her, or I could survive. I've met with Ms. Wells a few times, I heard myself say, strictly professional. She consulted me on some accounting matters related to the merger. There's nothing personal between us. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. Mrs. Reynolds studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. We'll note your statement in the file. You're free to go. I stood and walked toward the door. As I stepped into the hallway, I saw her. Brooke was standing at the far end of the corridor just outside the boardroom. She was too far away for me to read her expression clearly, but I knew. She had heard everything. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Brooke turned and walked away without a word. The look in her eyes stayed with me the whole drive home. Not anger, not betrayal, just a deep, tired sadness. The expression of someone who had learned long ago that people always chose safety over loyalty. That night, I sat in Caleb's doorway and watched my son sleep. The small bedroom was cluttered with toys and books, the walls covered with drawings and stickers. The teddy bear Brooke had given him was tucked under Caleb's arm, its soft brown fur pressed against the boy's cheek. I thought about my father, who had worked 2 jobs his entire life and never complained. I thought about my mother, who had told me every day to keep my head down, work hard, and never give them a reason to notice me. I thought about my ex-wife standing in the doorway of our old apartment, suitcase in hand, telling me I would never be anything more than what I was. And I thought about what I had taught Caleb. Don't be afraid. Stand up for yourself. Never let anyone make you feel small. But today, in that beige office with the motivational posters, I had done exactly what I taught my son never to do. I had shrunk. I had hidden. I had denied someone who trusted me just to protect a job I didn't even like. Caleb stirred in his sleep, pulling the teddy bear closer. Is the teddy bear lady coming back, Daddy? He murmured, half awake. I couldn't answer. A little later, Caleb opened his eyes again, looking at me with a clarity that seemed impossible for a child so young. Daddy, are you scared of her? My throat tightened. You told me not to be scared of anyone, Caleb said softly. You told me brave people don't run away. The words broke something inside me that had been holding together for years. I sat on the edge of my son's bed, staring at the teddy bear with its ribbon and soft fur, and finally admitted the truth I had been running from my entire adult life. I wasn't teaching Caleb courage. I was teaching him how to be afraid. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table until morning, staring at a blank sheet of paper. At some point, I started writing, not to Brooke, but to Caleb, words I wanted my son to understand when he was old enough to read them. I have spent my whole life being afraid of being seen, afraid of being judged, afraid of giving the world a reason to take what little I have. I thought I was protecting you by teaching you to be careful. But careful isn't the same as brave. And I've been confusing the two for years. I wrote. When Caleb padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes, I folded the letter and tucked it into my wallet. Daddy, are you okay? Caleb asked. I looked at my son, at the teddy bear still clutched under one arm, at the eyes that saw everything and forgave even more. I'm going to be, I said. I promise. I arrived at the office before anyone else. The HR department didn't open until later, so I sat in the lobby and waited. I watched employees trickle in, the early risers, the ambitious ones, the people who thought getting to work first meant something. None of them looked at me. I had spent years making sure of that. When Mrs. Reynolds walked past the lobby toward her office, I stood and followed her. Mr. Thompson, she looked surprised when she saw me in her doorway. Is there something I can help you with? Yes, I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. I need to correct the statement I gave yesterday. Mrs. Reynolds' expression shifted from confusion to caution. She gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing. Yesterday, you asked if I had a personal relationship with Ms. Wells. I told you it was strictly professional. I took a breath. That wasn't true. The room seemed to shrink around me. Ms. Wells and I are friends, I continued. We've spent time together outside of work. We've talked about things that had nothing to do with accounting or the merger. There's been no romantic relationship and no professional favoritism, but I wasn't honest with you yesterday, and I need to fix that. Mrs. Reynolds removed her glasses and set them on the desk. Mr. Thompson, do you understand what you're saying? This could affect your employment status. I understand. I met her eyes. And I'm saying it anyway because I have a 5-year-old son at home, and every day I tell him to be brave, to stand up for himself, to never let anyone make him feel small. Yesterday, I looked him in the face and realized I was teaching him the opposite. I was teaching him that it's okay to lie if you're scared enough, that protecting yourself matters more than protecting the people who trust you. I shook my head slowly. I won't do that anymore. If you want to fire me, but I'm done denying someone just to keep a job I never loved in the first place. Mrs. Reynolds stared at me for a long moment, then she picked up her glasses and put them back on. I'll update the file, she said quietly. You can go. I nodded and walked out. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in longer than I could remember, my chest didn't feel tight. I found Brooke's address in the company directory the same way she had found mine. The penthouse was in a building downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of place I had only ever seen from the outside. The doorman looked me up and down, but let me pass when I gave Brooke's name. The elevator rose, many floors in silence. When Brooke opened her door, she was wearing jeans and an old university sweatshirt. Her hair was unwashed. Behind her, I could see moving boxes stacked against the walls. Ryan. Her voice was flat, careful. What are you doing here? I went to HR this morning, I said. I told them the truth. I told them we're friends. Brooke's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Why? Because I was a coward yesterday. I chose my fear over you, and that's not who I want to be. It's not who I want my son to see. I looked past her at the boxes, the half-empty rooms, the penthouse that was already starting to look like a place nobody lived. What's happening here? Brooke stepped back, letting me inside. I resigned this morning. The board was going to force me out anyway after the merger, so I decided to leave on my own terms. She gestured at the boxes. I'm not sure where I'm going yet. First time in my life I don't have a plan. I walked slowly through the living room. The furniture was expensive. The view was stunning, but Brooke was right. The space felt like a museum. There were no drawings on the walls, no toys on the floor, no evidence that anyone had ever truly lived here. You're not going to miss this, I said. No. Brooke sat on the arm of a white leather couch. I spent years climbing to get here, and now that I'm leaving, I can't think of a single thing I want to take with me. I turned to face her. I owe you an apology. What I did yesterday, denying you in front of HR. That wasn't about you. It was about me. About all the years I spent making myself small because I thought that was the only way to survive. Brooke shook her head. You don't owe me anything. I'm the one who showed up at your door uninvited. I'm the one who pulled you into my mess. You gave me something I didn't know I needed, I said. A chance to see myself through someone else's eyes, someone who wasn't judging me or afraid of me or trying to use me, and I wasted it because I was scared. I took a step closer. I don't know what we are. I don't know what this is or where it goes, but I'm done pretending you don't exist. I'm done pretending that the only way to protect myself is to push away everyone who gets close. Brooke looked at me for a long time. Then slowly she smiled. The first real smile I had seen from her since that night in the cafe. Caleb asked about you, I added. He calls you the teddy bear lady. Brooke laughed, and the sound filled the empty penthouse in a way nothing else could. Some months later, I still worked at the same company. I hadn't been fired, but I hadn't been promoted either. I didn't care. Every evening, after Caleb went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with textbooks and practice exams spread out in front of me. I was studying for my independent financial consulting certification, the first step toward the dream I had buried years ago. Caleb noticed the change. "Daddy, what are you doing?" he asked one night, climbing into my lap to look at the books. "I'm learning how to not be scared anymore," I said. Caleb considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could manage. "Is it working?" I smiled. "I think so." Brooke had moved into a small apartment across town. She was working as a consultant for a nonprofit that helped women start their own businesses, a job that paid much less than her CEO salary and made her much happier. She came to visit Caleb regularly, sitting on the floor with him to look at his drawings, reading him stories before bed, laughing at jokes that only made sense to a child. She and I talked on the phone most nights, long conversations about nothing and everything, the kind of conversations neither of us had ever had with anyone else. We didn't define what we were. We didn't need to. For now, it was enough to simply exist in each other's lives without pretense or fear. On the morning of my first interview for an independent consulting position, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror adjusting my tie. My phone buzzed. A text from Brooke. "Good luck today. Caleb made you something. I'll send a picture." A moment later, a photo appeared. A crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one medium, one small. Underneath, in wobbly kindergarten letters, Caleb had written, "Daddy is brave." I stared at the picture for a long time. Then I walked to Caleb's room and pushed open the door. My son was just waking up, the teddy bear still tucked under his arm. "Hey, buddy," I sat on the edge of the bed. I need to tell you something before I go." Caleb rubbed his eyes. "What, Daddy?" I took my son's hand. "You weren't born to make yourself small for the world, and neither was I. It took me a long time to learn that. Too long. But I don't want you to wait as long as I did. I want you to know it now while you're still young enough to believe it." Caleb looked at me with those wide, serious eyes. "Okay, Daddy." I kissed his forehead and stood at the front door. I took one last look at the apartment, the toys scattered across the floor, the crayon masterpieces covering the refrigerator, the small life I had built out of love and fear and everything in between. Then I stepped outside. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking toward a job I tolerated or a life I had settled for. I was walking toward something I had chosen, and that made all the difference. Some stories don't just entertain us, they reach straight into your chest and quietly rearrange everything you thought you knew about life. Looking back at my journey with Brooke and my son Caleb, one lesson still moves me to tears every time I think about it. For years, I lived small, convinced that keeping my head down in our Chicago apartment was the only way to protect my little family. As a black single dad, I told myself caution was wisdom, silence was safety, and shrinking myself meant survival. But the night Brooke showed up at my door with mascara running down her face, completely broken, and later when Caleb looked up from his picture book and asked if I was scared of the crying lady, my heart cracked wide open. I realized I wasn't teaching my boy courage, I was teaching him fear. The most valuable lesson I learned is that real bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing honesty over comfort, connection over isolation, and a full life over mere survival. It's standing up in that HR office and refusing to deny someone who trusted me. even when it could cost everything. It's looking at your child and deciding you'll live boldly so they never learn to hide. When I finally spoke my truth, I didn't just change my own path. I broke the cycle for Caleb and showed him that real men don't make themselves small. They rise with love and integrity. If this story touched something deep inside you, tell me in the comments. What fear have you been carrying that you're ready to face today? I read every single one. And if moments like this move you to live bolder, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, and join our community. Let's keep sharing these real, heart-opening stories together. Your support means the world.